Hey, Jim.
Hey, Dean.
Jim, tell folks a little bit about you, and then I've got my favorite hypothetical question to give you.
Oh, man. Can't wait to get to that. So, I am a 20 plus year chief revenue officer. I worked entirely in B2B tech, if you will, managed organizations from 5 to 350 million. Had three great exits, but hey, look, man, not everything I touched turned to gold. Now I focus as a CRO fractional consultant advisor. I primarily serve industrial manufacturing and professional services organizations. And man, every day I just live my dream, perfecting my craft, sharing my craft, practicing my craft. So that's a little bit about me, Dean.
I have had a conversation last year. I did a big write up on it for the fractional audience that I have. In that case, it was a conversation with his CEO, and I said, like, what are you looking for generally? Because almost everyone in my audience is a fractional CMO or a CRO, and he said, I'm basically paying for the stuff that they know, and I'm definitely uh, avoiding paying for the stuff that they failed at. Somebody else carried that loss, and I just get the benefit from it, which is why I usually don't talk to like people who don't have like at least 10, 15 years experience. Ideally, they failed at a few things and some other company suffered that loss, and I get the lesson from it without having to actually pay for the education. So yeah,
That's
you're
a
right on the
great
money on that one.
perspective.
No.
Yeah, that's a great perspective because it's all about experience, right? And it's all
Yeah.
about can you move quicker and more competently? And you're
Yeah.
right. Sometimes you got to try and test and learn.
Well, okay, Jim. So,
Sir.
question: Do you want to? Do you want your hypothetical as if you're a consultant slash fractional slash interim, or do you want it as like a full time CRO employee?
Whatever serves you best.
All right,
I
we'll do the
can, I
consultant side.
can,
So you've got a new
yeah.
client. Most of your clients and most of your interactions with them, I imagine, are virtual. Zoom meetings or whatever. But this one's only 5 minutes from your home. So today's day one of a brand new engagement with a brand new client for you. And so you're actually going to show up Monday at 9 o'clock. Okay. When you walk in, what's your dream scenario that you're walking into as a consultant, sort of, fractional CRO type? Or what's your nightmare scenario that you're walking into?
Well, normally it wouldn't quite work like that. You'd have some interviews in alignment, but let's just go with the
Sure.
scenario. I walk in. I think for me, the first thing is around alignment, right? Like, is there an expectation from whoever I'm serving, the CEO and the board, and is it realistic and connected, if you will? The second thing I would go through is commitment. Are they really committed
Right.
to the effort? I'd like to say is the happier stage of my life and career. I am not necessarily your traditional consultant. I do not try to have lots of clients. I do not try
Right.
to maximize my income. If I did that, I'd go be a full-time CRO again.
Yeah.
But for me, I do value my time and I really want to work with people who are committed to an outcome. So my nightmare scenario is there's not alignment around what that goal is, and then they're not committed to do what's necessary to get to that goal. And so that commitment might mean their involvement. That commitment might involve their willingness to change.
Mm-hmm.
And probably the third pillar to me is just the broader team. Like, is there full alignment with who's ever maybe bringing me in and who might I have to work with that we're all focused. So I don't know. The more I blabber on, Mr. Dean, I just would say it really starts with like dream is alignment. Nightmare is if somebody thinks that hiring me is like a
Right.
magic bullet and I'm going to go away and I'm going to solve all their needs without the level of engagement. And I've had not a lot of those. I can think of one in particular where, I've got a CEO running a professional services business, spending his time on his own consulting practice. hiring a consultant to then manage my engagement. And it's just like not aligned. And then the scope, what we're focused on, is just not really connected to the realities of the business. So anyway, maybe that helps a little bit on
Yeah.
Dream and Nightmare.
And Jim, hi, welcome. Oh, I'm sorry, Cory.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Cory, you
Good
there?
to see you, Dean.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah,
Hey,
can you hear me?
tell folks a little bit about you. Yep. Tell folks a little bit about you, and then I want to put you into that weird scenario.
Sure. Yeah, good to be with you. A little bit about me. If you look at it at the core, I'm a growth strategist who executes with attention to the bottom line in the P&L. You can view me as a CEO's right hand. I've been born of experience in automotive, SaaS data, heavy transportation, salvage, and fintech financial services. The functional areas span sales, marketing, HR, product, and operations. A lot of it in B2B2C and multi-location retail. Been a CEO advisor, mentor, sounding board, even done a year now as a management professor, which has been a lot of fun, and I connect people to capital. So, honored to be here.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. So when you walk in, let's say with a new client, right, on day one, what's the nightmare and what's the dream scenario you might walk into?
Yeah, so let's go with nightmare since you opened with that one. A nightmare scenario is where you actually have a company that's an investor's concubine, as opposed to something that is supposed to take flight on its own, succeed on its own, and build its own business and growth, where that is the priority. Another nightmare perspective is if the CEO's objective isn't to build for the consumer, industry, and market pain point, but to fill his personal coffers. If he has a mission, vision, values, guiding principles established, and it's not actually how he's operating, and then he can't articulate it at the ready, there's a problem there. So that'd be a nightmare. If the CEO has also embedded an unhealthy risk tolerance and adoption into the company, that's also a problem. If you got self-interested actors that aren't looking at the superordinate goals and the big things to do collectively for the customer and the business and the stakeholder, that's also a huge problem, especially if they're in the C-suite and their lackeys have been brought in to enable their taking. So, but that's my nightmare scenario. I could go on, but that's a lot.
Before you talk about a dream scenario, can you explain investor's concubine?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there's scenarios where businesses are started and created so that they can deliver specific pathways to benefits for an investor that are really a means to an end. So they're a tool in the tool shed. They're not their own entity that's supposed to take flight and fully succeed in what they're supposedly trying to do in the market. So
Okay.
you have to make sure all the things are aligned and make sure everybody's on the same page and they're going after the market pain point and trying to solve for that to generate a return, as opposed to solving for something else way up the food chain that's on an investor's priorities. That's not what this company is trying to do.
So the dream scenario is everyone's rowing in the same direction. They're all on, going after the same thing.
Yeah, in service of the customer to grow the business and drop profit to the bottom line. Correct.
Okay. So after you've been working with a company for a while, I mean, you're brought in and everyone sort of understands a certain value prop, right? We bring in Cory. He's going to be able to see things we don't see, or recognize things we don't recognize, or do things we don't do, right? You're about 90 days in now. You're walking down the hall and says, Cory, man, I was just thinking about you yesterday. I was part of the selection committee for bringing you in. We all thought we kind of like understood it, but we had like basically an aha moment last night, just talking about what you've been doing here. And it's like, oh, now I get it. What's the aha moment when a company brings in someone like you?
The aha moment is when they see that I've taken the time to look at and understand and meet with the people, to understand the business, to understand the pain points of the colleagues, the pain points of the teams, the pain points of the board members, the pain points of the shareholders, the pain points of the customers, the prospects, the partners and all of it. And as part of that, not only am I focused on the bottom line and how everybody gets their individual objectives accomplished and wins and stitching that together for everyone's benefit, but I'm doing it in a way where if you think back to Maya Angelou's quote, especially when dealing with colleagues and peers and everyone, that not only are you going after what you are doing and what you're saying, but you're making sure that you're cognizant of how people are going to remember you for how you've made them feel. Right. So listening, being present, engaging, supporting, and tying it all together for a macro level win that everybody benefits from. That's what they're going to see with me.
And Jim, how about you? Like, what's sort of the aha moment when clients like actually like realize it's not just A, it's also B?
Well, for me, it's just my nature and my personality. When I was a CRO and now as a consultant fractional, like, you don't have time. Urgency is of the utmost priority.
Right.
And so a lot of my work I do through workshops and sessions, and I would just say every one of them is designed to bring urgency and the right change. So I would say that people even come out of those first sessions with like a good comparison of what great looks like. And a lot of times it comforts me when they walk out of those with like, wow, it's so obvious that what we should be doing versus what we're doing. And for me, I expect and drive that aha moment to happen almost literally within the first 30 minutes of my work with them when we're actually focused and so forth. And, you know, I think people sometimes are just surprised at the level of urgency and how much I care about the outcome. But again, as I always tell my clients, I am ambitious for them. I am not an ambitious person. So I push them really hard to get the outcome. You know, I'm not looking to, try to build some massive consulting business. And so I think that allows more focus on the customer and the right outcome.
All right. So let's change scenarios then. Now, Jim, you're on stage. You're the keynote speaker at a big conference. Okay. Everyone in the audience, about 250 people, they have all risen up through the ranks. They're all starting their first ever CRO gig tomorrow, whether it's as a fractional or it's like a full-time gig. So they're brand new. Like, you're way ahead expert-wise on them. Okay. So we're going to walk you through this speech and talk about sort of three main concepts. I'll give you like 3 sentences and you just complete them with however many words it takes to complete them. Do what you need to do. Okay. So number 1, just starting out, first ever engagement or employer as a CRO. You're going to be surprised by what?
Well, let's take on people who are going to be full-time CROs at organizations. I think they're going to be surprised at the level of internal effort they're going to need to dedicate time to. And they're going to probably be surprised by the breadth of the role that they need to play to be successful. Alignment is important, whether it's to the CEO, whether it's to the board, whether it's to your fellow C-level, whether it's your sales leadership or customer success leadership or RevOps. I was always a full journey, full cycle, full breadth CRO. And so that alignment takes time internally to get everybody together. And I think people would be surprised by that. And then I think they'd also be surprised by the necessary of the skills or the breadth you need. You got to be able to go toe to toe with the CFO to be a great partner and to make sure you protect the company, but also that you can drive revenue and growth. You're going to have to be able to go toe to toe. And I don't mean like fighting, but you've got to be able to have enough breadth around marketing, customer success, sales, finance. you're going to really need to be a business leader. And I think sometimes people are surprised by that. In fact, I mentor one of my clients right now is a CRO who just came to me and said, listen, I have the title as a CRO. I am not a CRO. I need you to help me have the breadth and depth to do this. I am really a VP of sales, but I want to be a CRO. Help me. And I think a lot of people, that would be maybe the number one thing that would they be surprised about in the day of the life.
And Cory, how about you? Talking to that audience, they're just starting out. What are they going to be
Yeah.
most surprised by when they step into the job?
Yeah. So talking about moving into the CRO job, the breadth and scope of what you have to touch to really succeed, which is pulling the employee experience lever and the customer experience lever through all the touch points of the organization, and how the role is going to need to interface with all the C-suite colleagues and all the various folks to accomplish it. And also the level of risk anybody that's moving into that role is expected to navigate, to stitch all those things together while honoring those individual swim lanes and the people responsible for delivering those. They're going to be people that are out for your failure. They're going to be people that are out to enable and hasten that failure as opposed to your success. And then they're going to be pockets of support and opportunity to capitalize on to get you further down the field faster. And then also the balancing of the need for velocity of execution to make the impact, to generate the revenue, generate the growth, gain the efficiencies while honoring the relationships, while taking the time to make sure you're building enough of a relationship so that you don't get the short-term objective, win the battle, and lose the war.
And okay, so let's flip around then. Cory's still talking to that audience, right? And what you're also going to find is that most companies just don't understand what.
I think many don't understand what a CRO role can really give to the business, and many of the people don't. There needs to be alignment, there needs to be communication, there needs to be education on that. I think it's super important to make sure that if a new CRO is being installed, that the mandate given to that CRO by the CEO and the board is clear to the entire employee organization. And I think there needs to be an all hands meeting to do the introduction, to lay that out, the scope, the in and out, the objectives, the expectation of support, how the person's been tasked to engage, and make those things happen. Because without that alignment, massive risk to failure and not hitting the objectives and the whole reason for bringing the person on board.
And Jim, how about you? You're talking to this audience and you're saying, what you're going to find, most companies don't understand about the CRO role or don't understand about selling in 2025 is what?
I would say that they don't understand enough about their customer and buyer, or they don't understand the need to focus on that as well. I'm just always surprised how often I've had CR roles, looked at CR roles, do consulting and so forth. And when I look at the momentum of that business, and I'm looking at the touch points of that business of where are we actually close to our buyer and our customer in learning and living, like I'm usually just surprised. A lot of times they don't do closed won interviews, closed lost interviews. Sometimes they don't have advisory boards, or sometimes they're super biased. Like, okay, I got the 20 customers that I've always had, all good. But I really see a gap in just commitment to voice of customer or understanding them. And as it relates to the CRO role, and my advice to the new CROs is don't make that mistake. If you don't understand your customer and your buyer, then you're going to struggle, because then your team's not going to understand it. And it's going to be really hard to drive revenue when you're focused on yourself. In general, no one really cares about you. They don't really care about your product. They really care about the outcome. And I don't know, I'm just always surprised the level of internal focus that people get.
Mm-hmm.
Even you see it in onboarding and enablement. Here's my product. Here's how you demo the product. Okay, well, what are we teaching about the profile of the customer and the
Right.
buyer and their view? So anyway, most companies, I don't think they understand enough about their customer and buyer. And my advice to the CROs is change that. Make that a priority. As much as you get pulled into internal stuff, make sure you're tip of the spear being out there and understanding that buyer.
All right. I had like 4 things to say. I have forgotten all of them. So that's how I know it was a good answer. Good job for both of you. Okay, so they're trying to like wave you off stage. You're a bit of a talker, and so like you're going past your time limit. But by God, you're going to say one more thing before you step off that stage. And so you're telling them, look, if I was you, I would make sure that by the 90-day mark, I had at least done X. What is X?
Is that a question for me, Mr. Dean?
Yeah.
Or thank you.
Then we'll switch to Cory.
I think my first response would be, you don't have 90 days. So I get that we've got the question around the 90-day milestone, but that milestone should be that you have like a strategy and a roadmap to drive the necessary growth for, I'm thinking, at least a 12 to 15 month period. And the reality is, I don't think you've got 90 days to do that. And that strategy to me is all encompassing, right? It's really about, staffing, incentive plan, org structure, alignment. I'm not saying that you've implemented it all, but I'm just saying you better have the roadmap to drive growth. And my other tip is you don't have 90 days. When I think you always get better at a role and so forth. My last, I think, real CRO role, took it from 20 million to 70 million. We sold it for $500 million. And when I look at the growth from 20 to 70 million, I think most of that growth got attributed to the work that I rolled out within the first 45 days I was there. Now, that's because even when I'm evaluating the role, I'm interviewing, I'm scheming, I'm planning. On day one, I already have a sketch of a plan. But within 45 days, I reorged, I replanned, I re-territoried, re-messaged, and had an initiative around a new sales methodology and around a new alignment with marketing and product, all within 45 days. I am telling you, if that took me 90 days, I don't know, man. Like, I don't think I hit the numbers. I don't hit the goals. There's just not a lot of patience. Think about how long it takes to drive change. I'm going to go hire someone. Okay. So now I got to recruit. I got to onboard. I got to give them time. Yeah. Like, just think about rebuilding territories or in org structures or aligning people. Like, it's going to take you maybe, a quarter or two, and then you're looking at results. There's not many CRO gigs out there that they're like, okay, take a year, figure it out, get everything in action, man. You've got to be driving growth from day one. So anyway, sorry to blabber on. No, I would just say you don't have 90 days. You don't have 90 days. There better be visible actions and a plan in at least half that time and so forth. And in that half that time, you better have the blueprint and roadmap to drive actual growth. And that's where I think the CRO job is not a VP of sales job, because to know what to do that is going to drive the change, I am just telling you, the same plan's not going to work everywhere else. I'm not going to go to LinkedIn and get some great blueprint and it's going to work for me. What I did in my last CRO job may not always work here. Everything can't look like a nail because all I've got in my toolbox is a hammer. But anyway, sorry to be so passionate about it. You don't have 90 days. You better have your roadmap strategy for growth, and you better have a pathway to change those numbers pretty quickly.
The market doesn't care about us. You don't have 90 days. 2 lessons.
You said it much better than I did.
It's my whole job. I'll
That's
help you out to
like
say something in 5 words instead of 500.
The gift is visible, my friend.
Cory, how about you? So you're talking to this audience, and this is their first ever time at this level, right? After having come up, like, what do they absolutely, whether you want to do 90 days or less, what do they absolutely need to make sure that they know or have done by the time they're 90 days in, if they want to stick around?
Yeah, well, and I'd say on day one, they need to be thinking that if they move too slowly, they can kill the company and their
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to remain in the role long term. If they move too fast, they can also kill their opportunity to remain in the role and in the company long term. So it's a balancing act. Got to understand, do the one-on-ones, get to know the people so that you can get the insight as well as know the numbers and financials to develop the plan and strategy quickly. Then you assess the talent. Then you hire fast if you need, and you fire faster. If something's not working out, don't let it linger. It's going to become a cancer, become a distraction, and create all sorts of other things. So move quickly on those things. They create bigger risks than you can imagine. You should trust your gut. You're there for a reason. They brought you in for your expertise, your insight, and what you can deliver, and they're expecting you to do it. But don't trust too many people too quickly. That's why those one-on-ones are important, so that you know what's happening, you know who's who, you understand their perspective on what's right and wrong with the business, what they think should be happening first, second, and third, and then you weave it all together super fast. Make sure that that strategy you build and the assessment is shared with the CEO. Preferably the board folks know that that's out there, because they may give you additional feedback on things you haven't thought of, and then you execute with velocity.
All right. So Cory, they finally got you off stage. You went over time, but whatever. Now you're out, just walking the floor of the conference, right? So companies have booths. There's lots of potential clients there. So you're talking, and you're finding you're striking up conversations with prospective clients. When you're talking to a prospective client and they're talking to you about sales and selling and the CRO role and what they need and so on, what do they tend to overrate and what do they tend to underrate versus the reality of someone who's actually in there doing that role? What is the company? What does the CEO overrate and underrate when they're talking to potential
clients?
CROs?
Well, I think people in a company tend to overrate their secret sauce and the value they think their product will bring to the market and think it's going to sell itself. And they underrate listening for what's going on with the prospect or client end in the market so that they can make sure that they align with their building offering to deliver the maximum value against that client challenge. So they underrate listening, they underrate voice of the market, voice of the customer, and they overrate their belief in their internal infallibility. That's usually what I've seen. But if I'm out at a conference, I'm checking out suppliers, I'm checking out competition, I'm seeing how prospects are reacting to competition. I'm looking at the booths, looking at the branding, talking to the people, seeing how they represent the brand, because branding is a promise made and promise kept. And then we're making sure that we were making the right promise for the problem and that we're keeping the promise on how we're going to solve it, and that that's delivered consistently and communicated right so that the prospects know and our people know how to deliver it to the prospect by listening and going with the data. Does that help?
Yep. Okay. So, Cory, I'm going to ask you possibly the hardest question in the entire interview series that we have here. Okay. What defines selling in 2025 compared to 5 years ago?
What defines selling in 2025 compared to 5 years ago?
Or if you want to think about it this way,
I think it's
today versus pre-pandemic.
Yeah. So there's a ton of digital noise. It's only increased and it keeps increasing. Right. Your go-to-market spend and your investments that you think used to work are less and less effective every day. Think about outbound SDRs, all of that stuff, and crank and churn and blow and go. Adding additional data, while data is valuable and you should have it to help with your segmentation and targeting, making sure how to use the data that you've got and keep clean data to support things, and then actually understanding how you're adding value and making sure that you're listening to prospects and having conversations so that you understand where they are, what their pain points are all the more important. I think building brand authority is way more important now online. So thought leadership positioning as a brand, so people will come to you as opposed to be receptive to you if you do outreach. I think that's super important, more so than ever. And you apply knowledge for the benefit of the prospect, customer, industry, market, team, and all the stakeholders out there, and yourself. I
Right. Well,
I think all of that's super critical.
and Jim, how about you? How is sales and selling different today than 5 years ago?
I think there's a greater emphasis on efficiency now than maybe 5 years ago. It's no longer growth at all cost. We got to be able to, grow sensibly. I'm sure the pendulum will swing back eventually along those lines. But I do think there is a little more focus on efficiency. I think there's a little more emphasis on intelligence. All of these, by the way, have good things and the negative double-edged sword, right? Like I could try to be efficient and do it in a good way, and I could also understaff and underinvest and do it in a bad way. I think there's a little more emphasis on intelligence. Maybe that's a nicer way of just saying leveraging AI and some of the technology. I like to use more the word intelligence than automation. But I think there's just a little more emphasis around targeting and insight and just decision making and account prioritization and just being smart about things. I don't think it's changed, but I don't feel like it was ever really accomplished 5 years ago. But I think there needs to be a constant emphasis on selling being a value-added profession. Sometimes I like to use the phrase, you need to sell, don't tell. Telling is about me. I have this product. It does this. It does this. Feature, 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 feature. Are you ready to buy? Selling is something I view as more buyer focus, solving pain, solving need, value add, provocative, challenger like, being of value. And I'm not sure I see a greater emphasis on it, but I like to believe, I know I have a greater emphasis on it along those lines. And then with the efficiency, I think we see a slightly greater push in accountability. Like it just can't be that, we're not accountable. Hey, I'm here. I'm a hunter salesperson. Okay, well, how many touches did you have this week, this month? How many meetings did you have, and so forth? In many ways, as I go through this list, it's like coming full circle back to almost how I started my career.
Yep.
But I do see a greater emphasis on efficiency. I do see a greater emphasis on trying to be a value-added seller, not just a teller. I see a greater emphasis on intelligence, and I think I see a greater push around accountability. Or that's what people should be pushing in 2025, in my opinion.
I don't know who had this quote, but I'm sure it was like 10, 15 years ago when I first came across it. It has stuck in my head ever since. And it's that all profit comes from inefficiency. It comes from either solving an inefficiency or preserving an inefficiency. But all profit comes from some kind of inefficiency. I've never gotten it out of my head. I've yet to prove it wrong.
Well,
okay.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So, Jim, and then I'm going to switch to Cory for this one. As you're talking to a new potential client, or in the case of full-time folks, a new potential employer, what's a red flag and what's a green flag that company might throw off, where you're like, oh, this is not for me, or these guys shouldn't be hiring anyone like me, or yes, I can't believe that they just said that. I love that. What's the red flag and what's a green flag? One of each.
Yeah, I think, if you're a CRO and you're interviewing, The more that a red flag to me is if the job starts looking like a VP of sales or a sales manager role. If you start sensing disconnect between that CEO and board, if you start seeing games around expectations or goals, like if the goals, they're not willing to share the goals, they're not going to give you the opportunity to impact the goals, things like that. You might see games being played around your title, around your comp. This all means like absolute red flag. Like they can't have you, if you can't speak to a couple customers, like not good, right? And I'm always surprised at how many businesses you see that have PE backing or VC funding.
Right.
And it's like, okay, is our fundamental proposition valuable? But it's like, no, we're all in mirage world, right? The investors putting pressure on the CEO because no one wants to acknowledge that the business isn't on the right trajectory. So we still have these goals,
Right.
but really the solution and the market acceptance is just not right, a right fit. Then the CEO is going to be under pressure, put that on you. And so the more you see misalignment, man, red flag. Green, like the more you see sensible strategy, the more you see them wanting to involve you, go to market alignment. Hey, we're working on the plan, but we know we're going to need your input on the plan. Hey, when we work on this plan, I want you and the CMO or the chief product officer. The more you see go to market alignment, the more you see sensible strategy, the more you see them involved or willing to review sales and goals and expectations, then those are all really good things. It means then you're going to have the ability to make the change
Right.
appropriately to drive an outcome. The more that you see, they think it's like a robot job and it's all set up, then I mean, I'm not sure that's a CRO job. And if that was all set up and it was great, then why the hell do they need you? Right?
Right.
Like the business, they're coming to you because something is failing. They're not looking for a new CRO because life's great. I don't care if it's like I got a VP sales and I don't think he has the runway. All good. At the end of the day, someone's not happy with growth. You just need to make sure that you're aligned with that. And that's the root of the green and the red flags.
And Cory, how about you? What's a red flag a company would give off and what's a green flag?
Yeah, so red flags on going into or examining going into a company: CEO disengagement. The depth of CEO engagement is important in making sure that they have the strategy, that they understand how your role is going to go, that they're wanting to drive that into the organization for success. Chaos in the C-suite, churn. That's also a red flag. Now, it could present opportunity and be part of the reason you're there, but you need to understand that and have that conversation with CEO and with the board. A disengaged board, when they could have had the opportunity to dig in during the interview process, or if they're not showing up for board meetings, those are red flags. Resentful C-suite colleagues regarding your appointment, regarding the establishment of the role, regarding the departure of the predecessor, all the fact that they weren't or even underlying colleagues that weren't promoted into the role and you got it instead. All of those political landmines in context, you need to be cognizant of and aware of and try to ferret out in the interview so you know what you're walking into and whether or not it's such a red flag you shouldn't do it.
And green flag?
Green flags. If they've got a culture that plugs in the voices of the various experts in their swim lanes and all the various functional areas, that's awesome. If they involve the different people in the development of strategy, if the culture supports voice of the employee and voice of the customer, or will allow that quickly, those are all green flags. If the CEO wants to know, wants appropriate conservatism in forecasting, in reality, that's also a huge green flag. If they don't, and they just want pie in the sky things to throw to the investors, that's a problem. Attention to financials, also very important. And proactive and structured communication frameworks are also greens to me. That would be really attractive.
Okay. All right, so it's time to wind down. You guys have been very chatty. This episode's gone a little longer than normal, and I love that because it's more clips. Here's your opportunity. We'll start with Jim, and then we'll switch to Cory. Jim, do you have a question for Cory? And then Cory, a question for Jim. And of course, an answer, if there is one. Any question you want to ask?
Cory, what was your best sales role that you enjoyed the most? What role just made you the happiest in your career, and why?
Yeah. So the best sales role in the career is one that works with customers to me and works with employees. I remember selling vehicles to car dealers when I was in the field in Virginia and in Baltimore and the Eastern Shore of Maryland and Delaware. And I helped those dealers, those businesses with their strategy, with their growth plans, and then securing the product that I'd sell in wholesale to enable them to reach them, and then help them with the marketing to make sure it aligned with our brand stuff, with the other advertising we were doing in the region and nationally, so that they could grow and they could win and be profitable. It always feels good to be a consultative salesperson, and in the process of delivering that value, you're hitting your own numbers. I mean, you could go to sitting in the pandemic in a different role where I hit 5 or 6 sales as an individual contributor in Cabo San Lucas and made a massive amount of commission. That felt really good. Giving bonus payments quarterly to my people when we were in a regional sales office that all executed felt really good. But also the challenge and fixing problems for other people as part of a team feels good. So all of those come to mind. Great
My
question.
first ever enterprise as an AE, like for enterprise level software stuff. I was in an Uber in Denver on the way to the airport, and I was just an AE, just started as an AE for that company, and I'm in the car with the global head of sales, and we're just talking about something, and he says, "I'll tell you one thing, whatever company you go to, your job," as in he's looking at me, right, like the bottom, right, just your job is fun, my job is fun, every job between you and me, pure pressure."
I'm not sure how his job got to be no pressure, but we'll accept it, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I was going to say
All right.
the pressure and the challenge. Yeah, C-suite is all the bigger, but it's a heck of a lot of fun. So
yeah. And then Jim, Cory, what's your question for Jim?
Yeah, so Jim, question for you: what most astonished you upon entry into your first CRO role, or any other CRO role, that just smacks you in the face like, oh my gosh, I remember this? And why did it astonish you? And what did it cause you to do?
I can think of a CRO role, and I think the thing that first astonished me. I'm sorry, Cory. I've got too many memories around how to answer that question. I would just say there's one role I took. It was actually a CEO role, but I was heavily functioning as the CRO. And it was a private equity backed acquisition company. And, it's one of these prominent PE groups, and you just assume, and you're relying on their due diligence. And, they had bought a company. They'd bought a company based on a new platform that was being rolled out to market. And then literally, like in my first week, second week, third week, I start unraveling really the state of this new platform. And it was just it wasn't there. It was almost like a complete sham, if you will. And it was a really tough scrabble. I mean, I had to go back and rewrite contracts, rescind contracts, try to reposition the brand, repair the relationship, and so forth. So I don't know if that's the greatest example, Cory, but maybe in Dean's theme here of some of our questions, I think it's just a reminder to me, for me, in any lessons I could give other CROs, is like, just make sure you do your firsthand diligence. You can get distracted by big brand names on VCs and private equity group, but I'm just telling you, they swing and miss a lot themselves. And, that was one of the most astonishing things I had stepping into a role.
All right.
Yeah,
so
makes
guys,
sense. Product. Mm-hmm.
This has been like fantastic and long. I think it might be our longest episode ever. But before we go, we'll
Sorry,
start
Dean.
with Cory. Cory, these days, who should reach out to you, and how should they do it?
Yeah, so great question. CEOs that are in some type of growth stall or profit
Right.
stall or need a transformation and want multidisciplinary experience across functions and industries, not healthcare, should call me or text me on 615, and it's 2-800-COX, 280-0269. They can also reach out on LinkedIn if so. The link is there. Cory R, middle initial, Cox, COX, also finds me very quickly.
All right. Yeah.
Happy to help.
And Jim, who should be reaching out to you these days, and what's the best way for them to get to you?
If you're a CEO, investor, if you're a revenue leader, and you're looking to drive growth and you're looking for all the tips, the tricks, the frameworks, the methodologies to drive growth, then ping me. The best way is just email me. I'm Jim at expertgtm.com. That's short for expert go-to-market.
All right. Guys, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. Loved it. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see everyone next time. Bye.
Cheers. Thank you, Dean.
See ya.
Thanks, Dean. Great to meet you, Jim. Take care. Bye-bye.